Hello, I'm Georgina Rose, and welcome back to the Darling YouTube channel. On this channel, we discuss everything related to magic, mysticism, religion, and everything on the fringe of esoterica. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about a subject that I think most occult bloggers are terrified of. This is something that we all get told, and anyone who has expressed interest in the occult has had this said to them. And many people who are interested in the occult are actually afraid this might be true. And I think a lot of people who are in my position, who are occultist, really don't want to talk about this because, it's actually quite complicated, and the gut reaction is just to say, no, the occult is not evil. But it's actually very complicated, and as an occultist, I'm going to get into why the occult isn't evil and give the nuances of where the idea that the occult is evil comes from, where the occult can be used for evil, and the distinction between good and bad magic, and discuss what metaphysical evil actually is. So let's get into it. But before we start, I do want to mention this video is partnered with UWELUCK. So they make these really pretty Eastern esotericism inspired crystal-based jewelry. I was sent these 2 bracelets and this 1 necklace. Their stuff's really pretty. They're size adjustable, so whether you have a small wrist or a small neck or a big neck, it'll fit you. And they have such pretty motifs that you can really see the Eastern esoteric tradition in. I really like them. This one specifically, I've actually been wearing out a lot when I go out and run errands. So yeah, check them out. They're truly spiritual pieces of jewelry with specific meanings. So if you like to infuse your spirituality in your way of dress, definitely check out UWELUCK. It'll all be linked below. But let's get into the subject. So why do people think the occult is evil? This idea actually comes from Christianity. So if you look at the Christian tradition, there are a lot of rules on what you can and cannot do magically, but Christian occultism exists. So, okay, why are we saying the occult is evil? So first we need to define what the occult is. So we know this critique is coming from Christianity, but I just said Christian occultism exists. So what is occultism? So the word occult, and I do think looking at linguistics and definitions is really valuable, is actually a Latin word that means to conceal or to hide. So within religious traditions, there is the esoteric, which is the hidden meaning of things, and the exoteric, which is the outer meaning of things. Every religion has an exoteric and an esoteric, and most of the esoteric is concealed or hidden, thus occulted. Occult is actually kind of like a verb, like you could say it is occulted. So it is occulted information. And people are talking about the occult, they really actually mean, definitionally, anything that is hidden within a religion and is not part of the surface definition of what you are taught. So like if you went to a Catholic mass, of course, like the fact that the Eucharist is Jesus is exoteric, it's explained to you. But the specific ways that the priest moves his hand when he is doing the consecration is occulted because they don't explain to you exactly how that works. And when you become a priest, you are taught the mysteries of that and explained the esoteric symbolism. So every religion has an occult side and a public side. There is no religion that doesn't have it. And actually Christianity, the tradition that tends to be the most the occult is evil, has a rich occult tradition. If you see people doing work where they say these prayers to the saints to make them intercede, a lot of that is actually occult. They don't teach that in Sunday school. That's something you learn. As well, throughout the Renaissance, the medieval period, a lot of these texts that occultists point back to actually come from the Christian tradition. The Ars Goetia, as part of the Keys of Solomon, is perhaps the most iconic piece of occult literature ever written. It is a text that is a grimoire that is the basis of Solomonic magic. The idea of the demons of the Goetia and using God to command demons to your bidding is actually a Christian idea. Because when you do that, you are actually purifying yourself and getting closer to the Christian God in order to then command the demons. As well, there are a lot of grimoires, specifically texts like the Arbitel, that are Christian occult manuals about how to use angels to help you get closer to God or to do your bidding for various purposes. In fact, I would say Christianity might have one of the most rich occult traditions out there. As well, if you look to the East, Eastern Orthodoxy has a rich mystical tradition, and a lot of that is, yes, occult. So broadly saying the occult is evil, even from that Christian perspective, does not make sense. Now, when we look further out, we do understand that occult and esoteric techniques do predate Christianity. There are many ancient occult and ancient mystic traditions. And within those, how do we define what is good and what is evil? Because now we're outside of that Christian world. We're now in, say, the pagan world. So what's going on there? So when we look to the ancient pagan world, specifically I'm going to talk about the Hellenistic world, there was a distinction of 3 types of magical practices that were done. And all of these were actually occult. They were not things that you were taught if you went to the temple to do specific sacrifices or to say specific prayers or to celebrate a festival like Saturnalia. These techniques come from things like the Orphic Mysteries, right, which was a specific mystery cult. As well, there were the Eleusinian Mysteries, another mystery cult in that region. Furthermore, there were mystery occult cults, and by cult I mean religious group, not like the way we use cult now. Like the Vestal Virgins that had occult secret mysteries within them. And would those have been evil? No. So these 3 definitions that I just mentioned are really valuable because they actually divide magic into 3 categories. Goetia, and you'll notice the Ars Goetia, that demon-based Christian grimoire, also uses this term. And Goetia kind of referred to like baneful, dark magic. A lot of things that people would call witchcraft are within that Goetia category. And it was really like most practical type magic was Goetia. Now there was Theurgia, and Theurgia was divine magic of the gods. So, you know, saying the Orphic hymns, approaching the gods, doing mysticism, that was all Theurgia. And then there was Magia Naturalis, or natural magic. And that would be any magic that used plants or the stars. So any sort of planetary magic, that is Magia Naturalis, any sort of plant magic, Magia Naturalis, any sort of entheogenic practice where you were taking, say, a psychedelic type of plant to induce a ritual experience, that is Magia Naturalis. And these 3 types of magic were all viewed very differently. Specifically, Goetia was actually somewhat stigmatized. And when we look at pagan cultures around the world, we will notice witchcraft is actually kind of viewed separately from mysticism. Whereas now, when we talk about occultism, we're actually lumping everything together. And you know, the term occult, the problem I have with it, actually, even though I use it heavily, is that it is a broad term. It can mean a lot of things. Whereas in the ancient world, things were much more divided. Because when we look at like the way academia defines occult, it typically is referring to Western esotericism or esoteric mystery traditions from the West. Now, that encompasses all sorts of things. That includes anything like Neoplatonism, Hermeticism, Gnosticism, Thelema, Wicca, witchcraft, Nordic magic, right? A lot of things fall into that category. And so when we're looking to the ancient world, there is this kind of designated categories, right? This word occult was not actually used as a broad term. And so when we see like witchcraft, that was often used as a separate term. The archetype of the witch has always been an archetype of transgression or opposition. And so in many cultures, things like witchcraft were illegal. In fact, if you look at legal codexes from the ancient world, there are almost overwhelmingly rules and laws about the type of magic you could do, with witchcraft also being the banned category. As well, the term sorcery was often used in a similar way. In pre-Islamic Arabian paganism, the term sorcerer was used to refer to a bad magician. And this actually continued when Islam came to be. And so within Islam, you know, Sufism, well, that's mysticism. Well, sorcery or sahir, right? That is the bad stuff. And so most traditions that use jinn in their magical practices are sahir or sorcery or taboo, right? And so you see this legal distinction, right, between good magic, bad magic. And the way those lines were often drawn was on a few different things. Some cultures had a big problem with people doing magic on other people to make them act in different ways. Basically, the idea of like doing magic to control someone and make an outcome be what you want was taboo in many cultures. As well, working with spirits that were seen as evil spirits was often condemned. So jinn is, of course, a category of spirit. There are good jinn and there are bad jinn. The bad jinn are known as shaitans in Arabic. And the idea of working with a shaitan might be criminalized, whereas working with your Kareen, and your Kareen is a specific type of jinn that is sort of your guardian angel. Everyone has a Kareen. That would be licit. That would be allowed. In fact, Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, actually worked extensively with his Kareen and discussed this. There is one hadith, which is the Islamic sort of historical documents about Muhammad is the best way I could explain that, where he actually taught his Kareen or his double/guardian angel. It's a little different. They are technically like magical doubles, but they're also your guardian angel. I mean, the Kareen is a whole subject I could get into, but he taught his how to pray in the way that Allah taught him. So that's licit, right? Working with that jinn's okay. But if you were to go and summon up the shaitan jinn to then curse your enemy and make his house collapse, right? That would be considered a problem. So as time has moved forward, the idea of good and bad magic has become a lot less concrete as a category, right? Because as we've moved towards a rational secular time, with the Enlightenment happening and people kind of rejecting magic existing on the whole, all magic has become conjoined, right? Specifically, like if you go online and you say, I do magic, people will call you a witch. Witch is a specific thing. Witch is a transgressive type of magic. That is what it is. You are taking on the role of the opposer when you do witchcraft. And witchcraft refers to specific type of acts. Like if you look at Cornish witchcraft versus, Ukrainian witchcraft, you'll see similar type of things. You'll see the use of like effigies, puppets, heavy use of sympathetic magic, or the idea that if you use something similar in your microcosm, it will happen in the macrocosm. All those type of things are really consistent, meaning that witchcraft is pretty identifiable, right? It's pretty clear, like that line. Now, there is some complications with some traditions known as folk magic or magic of the people can sometimes kind of look like witchcraft. I think that archetypal and philosophical distinction is what marks it separate and how it was generally treated separately, though of course some people who did folk magic and midwifery were persecuted for witchcraft. There's a lot of documentation of that, and that's a huge historic problem, but what I'm saying is, not all magic is the same. It's all very different. It's not the same thing. Someone who is a mystic and someone who is doing witchcraft to curse their neighbor are fundamentally not doing the same thing. But since we live in a secular, atheistic culture on the whole, everything's been lumped together. And so what is the occult? It's used like the word witch. It's used as a blanket category to encompass all types of magic. And, now, who is left believing in magic? It is, of course, us occultists, but also those really devout religious people, because most religious people actually deny parts of their religion existing. Like, I would say your average Christian, I question their Christianity, right? Like, they believe, like, yeah, Jesus and all that, but they're skeptical about angels, right? They're skeptical about saints. They definitely are like, what do you mean demons? Like, what are you talking about, right? A lot of Christians are not that devout. And if you look at in any religious group, you see this, right? People just generally believe in science a lot more. Now, I believe science and spirituality is compatible. I don't think you need to choose one of these things. But a lot of people, they're like, well, science, spirituality, incompatible. We live in the modern times. And I would say most people are atheist or cultural atheist. And so the people who are left, who believe in magic, who are not us, are going to be the very religious, who, they tend to have that kind of puritanical flavor to them, right? And so they're going to think, all magic bad, except for my magic, that one's different. So what happens is the occult equals evil because all magic bad, but my magic, even though technically their magic is the occult too, because the occult just means to hide. And I want to give this concession. You can do evil with magic. You can do evil with the occult. There are occultists who I have heard about who do things that I think are evil, because metaphysical evil exists. If there is metaphysical good and we understand the gods as good, then there must be metaphysical evil. That must exist in a balance. If things are not balanced, they collapse. So there is evil occultism out there. I'm not denying this. I think anyone who denies this is just like having like an instinct reaction. They're like, well, you can't call me evil, you're calling me evil, so I'm gonna say, no, it doesn't exist. And I think that's in bad faith. I think that's not giving concessions. There have been many esoteric societies throughout human history. Some of those esoteric societies have done bad things, okay? I think we can say that. There are some esoteric societies that I think we should emulate. We should read their work. We should follow their path. There are others we shouldn't. And, when you really sit and think about it and consider all the types of magic out there and start reading the occult text, you'll see stuff you disagree with. You'll see stuff you think is evil. So why are we just gut reacting and not giving that context? There are many ways to do magic. I think of magic like a hammer. You can use a hammer to build a house or to hit someone on the head and kill them. And if we understand the power of magic and the power of the gods as something beyond our mundane capacities, we understand magic can have a major impact. As well, when we learn about the different types of spirits in the world, we understand there are evil spirits. Not all spirits are good. The gods are good. I suggest everyone contact the gods. Your ancestors are good. There are good spirits, right? Land spirits, nature spirits, angels, all of those, good spirits, right? The only good spirits aren't the gods too. I think some people, when they leave Christianity, they have this idea only God is good, which even in Christianity, that's not true. There's the saints, there's the angels, whatever. Okay. A lot of people think only the gods are good. Not true. There is a spiritual nature to everything. Animism is the root of all religions, and so we're all kind of animists, no matter who you are, if you really think about it for long enough. So yeah, the nature spirits are good, your ancestors, like the list goes on and on. There are many good spirits in this world. This world is overall a beautiful and good place. And when you actually walk this path, you strive towards goodness, you strive towards virtue. Specifically, if you have a Platonic influence, which everyone living in the West is actually a Neoplatonist. I find, I was actually really exploring the term Neoplatonism for a while because, well, they put it in the category, right? They're like, Western esotericism is Hermeticism, Neoplatonism, Thelema, and I'm like, okay, well, what the fuck is Neoplatonism? It's just like used with the list, like what does it really mean? And what that means is that everything descends from Platonism. Now, Platonism is a specific ancient Hellenistic tradition, but the core of that is in all things. So we're all Neoplatonist, that's just the truth there. But in the Platonic tradition, which is the base of what you do if you're a Western occultist, whether you're a pagan or a Christian, right, both those traditions actually are Neoplatonic, there's this whole idea of purification and virtue, right? Striving towards something higher, striving towards something more than our mundane existence, right? Rejecting that we should just be like hedonistic disasters and be selfish and hurt the people around us. Like we should strive to be better people. The goal of mysticism is to become better, to become closer, to become more in line with the divine. The purpose is to discover your true will. Gnosis, all these goals. Like people use the word gnosis like a meme, like, oh my God, that's so gnosis. Like if someone says something funny, but like gnosis is a real goal. Gnosis means knowledge. And if knowledge is a spiritual goal, then what is knowledge? Knowledge is truth. Truth is beauty. Truth is godness, right? And so we have to actually seek out truth, right? Like if you want gnosis as your goal, you have to actually think critically, read through these things, and understand not all spirits are good. There are evil spirits. Now, not all evil spirits are the same strength. There are what my friend Dave from Amateur Magus calls the shit tears, right? Those ghosts that come into your house and like knock things over, right? And then there are powerful evil spirits out there. Even in Thelema, a system where people often kind of, because of the Nietzschean influence on Thelema, see as a beyond good and evil system, there is still like an evil spirit mentioned called Choronzon. So within Thelema, one of the big things you do is after you discover your true will, and do a couple other things, it's not like you discover your true will, then do this, but later on in your journey, after you've made a lot of progress, you do this thing called crossing the abyss. Crossing the abyss is when you take a specific oath and then you undergo a test of your soul. And when you are crossing the abyss, there is a spirit named Choronzon, who is a snake that dwells at the bottom of the abyss. And if you are not strong enough to cross the abyss, then Choronzon devours you, right? Now, what is Choronzon? Choronzon's an evil spirit, okay? If there's a spirit that devours you during your dark night of the soul, evil spirit. That means evil exists. And actually, all those systems have this idea. There was a term that was used quite extensively in the Magical Revival, that's that Victorian Edwardian period we're pulling from very frequently, called Black Brother. Now, Black Brother got used a lot as an insult, but what does it mean? It means you're like a bad occultist and you serve something evil instead of something good. Now, you can reject Christianity. I'm not a Christian. I don't believe Jesus and God, and by God, I mean the Abrahamic God. There's many gods, but I don't believe that's the only path, so I'm not saying that, but I'm saying like you can follow a good spirit, you can follow a bad spirit. There's a lot more alignments than just like Jesus and Satan. It's a lot more complicated than that. But there is good and evil in this world. Every system admits this, and every system has a version of right and wrong. Now, I will say sometimes severity and malefic things are good. So what do I mean by that? I can see the red flags coming up. Sometimes you do actually have to do malefic things for the world to be a good place. Malefic means destructive, not evil. Certain things like eclipses, which are those really intense events that happen, right? That's an occult thing that's malefic, but it's not evil, right? Those things test us. As well, certain spirits like Saturn that rule over discipline and death are necessary because what happens after death? Rebirth. And so when you have a major transition or overturn in your life, you're having a malefic experience. That's not an evil experience. As well, sometimes you have to do baneful. So there's this concept called baneful, where basically means like negative. Sometimes you have to do negative magic. Sometimes you even have to do curses, okay? Sometimes even that has a purpose, right? I remember I knew a girl who was in a domestic violence situation, and she didn't know how to leave. So she actually did like cursing type magic, stuff that would be considered evil by many people. But was it evil? It got her out of a horrible situation. It protected her child she had with that person from violence. Would you call that an evil act? No. Actually, I would call it a virtuous act because she protected herself and she protected her child. So these things are actually quite complicated. I mean, I believe in good and evil, but I do think there's complexity to it. And I do think it's not, Christian morality. I'm not a Christian, okay? I think the Christian idea that the occult is evil is very silly, but I do still reject parts of Christian philosophy and theology, and I could do a video on why I'm not a Christian. But yes, I mean, it's complicated. There is virtue, but there's also nuance. right? Severity has a place as well. For creation to exist, there must also be destruction. And so most of the deities that relate to destruction are not actually evil. I see these things as different. I would call like evil itself to be a kind of force against the cosmos, more so than just a destructive force, because, you know, there's a difference between something that shapes through a bit of destruction, like by like, you know, using like a little, like, you know, when you make a statue, you have to like whack things and like knock rock off until it's perfect. Yeah. The difference between that and like a piece of dynamite that blows up your statue. You know what I'm saying? So evil's complicated, and I do think when people get into the occult, they do, you know, have a lot of theological questions, and they tend to change their religious position. And so that, to someone who's seen someone their whole life in a specific religious tradition, could seem like something's evil happening to them, but it's not. It's them growing as a person. And I think it's good to ask these questions. I believe in critical thought, so I think questioning these ideas is very, very valuable. But I think broadly saying the occult is evil is absolutely silly, because any occultist who is being honest and not just like, you know, reflexively responding to the situation because they're personally offended, understands that there is metaphysical evil. And so, you know, when people see something different from what they grew up around, it's pretty easy to reflexively say, that's evil, the occult is evil, right? But it's not. It's very complicated. And yeah, there are good occultists, there are bad occultists, there are good traditions, there are bad traditions, right? At the end of the day, a good spiritual tradition is going to make you a better person and make you get closer to the gods, not destroy you from the inside out. And that's a pretty easy way to tell if you're dealing with a good or a bad spirit, is, are you becoming stronger or are you becoming weaker? So yeah, I mean, definitely consider what you're doing, like think about it, you know, don't just do things, and allow yourself to have these doubts. I mean, doubts can lead to growth, but understand, no, the occult is not evil, and anyone saying this has not thought it all the way through. So thank you guys for watching. I also host the podcast, Pagan Perspectives by Georgina Rose. It's on this channel and on Spotify and most podcasting platforms under Pagan Perspectives by Georgina Rose. You can get extra videos every single month through Patreon. You also can get ritual guides, which are instructions on how to do rituals, and mentorship sessions with me. As well, I provide planetary remediation-based astrological natal chart readings and tarot readings that will all be in the description box below. And you can find me on every platform under the sun under .darling, D-A-T darling, D-A-A-T darling, oh my god, or Georgina Rose. Just search that and I should pop up. And I will see you guys in the next one. Have an amazing day, night, afternoon, mid-morning, mid-evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are. As well, like, comment, subscribe, and ring the bell. And if you're subscribed for 93 days, you will never have to wonder if the occult is evil again, because by then, you will have known. All right, bye!